Hello children, today we will do the story The Blue Bead by Nora Burke. The story is actually about the heroic deed of a 12-year-old girl Sepia who saves the life of a Gujjar woman from a crocodile. But she does not brag about her bravery. She only shows her fondness for a blue bead, which she feels as her important possession. Let's begin the story. From the deep water came the crocodile. Out of the black water, curved with whirlpools, and into the frill of gold shallows by the stepping stones. He was twice the length of a tall man, and inside him, among the stones which he had swallowed to aid digestion, rolled a silver bracelet. So, this was a big crocodile, twice the length of a tall man. And he was among the stones, he was rolling among the stones, and as if he could digest even the hardest stones, and among which was also a silver bracelet. Timber was being floated down this great Indian river from forest further up, and there were slippers lying stock around the stones until someone came to dislodge them and send them their way, or until floods lifted them and jostled there along. The crocodile had no need to hide himself. He came to rest in the glassy shallows among logs and balanced there on tiptoe on the rippled sand, with only his raised eyes out of the water and raised nostrils breathing for the clean sunny air. So this river, although it was full of crocodiles, but there was no need to hide for this big crocodile, as it was full of actually timber and logs which rolled down through the forest, and only it was someone or very rarely came to dislodge them, or it was generally dislodged by the floods or lifted when it got stuck. The crocodile never tried to hide himself. It usually stayed there, even it came on the sand and rippled over there, and when he was in the water, hardly his nostrils and eyes could be seen. Around him, broad sparkling water travelled between cliffs and grass and forested hill. A jungle track came out of scrubby side and down to the sun whitened stepping stones on which a little flycatcher was fluttering and trilling along. The mugger crocodile, blackish brown above and yellowish white under, lay motionless, able to wait forever till food came. So this was a big crocodile, that is mugger. In Hindi we call it a muggermuch. It was blackish brown if we look from above, and yellowy white in the inner side. It used to lay motionless and wait for the food to come. This antediluvian saurian, this prehistoric juggernaut, ferocious and formidable. All this adjective are used to show the very ferociousness of the crocodile. A vast force in the water, propelled by the unimaginable and irresistible power of the huge tail. Actually, this crocodile become very powerful when they are in water. It lay lapped by ripples athrob in his throat, his mouth running almost the whole length of his head, was closed and fixed in that evil bony smile, and where the yellow underside came up to it, it was tinged with green. So this mugger was very dreaded one. From the day, perhaps 100 years ago, when the sun has hatched him in a sandbank, and he had broken his shell and got his head out and looked around, ready to snap at anything before he had even fully hatched, from that day when he had at once made from the water, ready to fend for himself immediately, he had lived by his brainless craft and ferocity. The writer was here says that since it was a very old crocodile, perhaps 100 years old, and very first day when he hatched out, he had started looking for the food and he ate whatever he caught. Escaping the birds of prey and the great carnivorous fishes that eat baby crocodiles, he had prospered. That means except the birds as well as the carnivorous fishes, he ate everything. And storing it till buttered in holes in the bank, tepid water to live in, and plenty of rotted food grown him at his great length, and everything he stored where he used to live, and everything, so much of plenty of food he had that it was lying there and rotting. Now nothing could actually peace him. He was a great one, and nothing seems to pace him down. It was the most dreaded crocodile, and he was always looking for the food, and whatever food came on his way, he used to go through it. Now, nothing could pierce the inch thick armored hide, and even rifle bullets which would bounce off. Only the eyes and the soft underarms offered a place. He lived well in the river, sunning himself sometimes with other crocodiles, muggers, as well as the long snorted fish eating gharials, on warm rocks and sandbanks where the sun dried the clay on them quite white, and where they could plop up into the water in a moment of alarm. So his hide was so thick that even the rifle bullets would bounce off. Yes, the most important or the delicate part of crocodiles are the eyes and the underarms. If you want to defeat a crocodile, you have to hit in the eye or the underarms. He used to, live very nicely in the river without any fear. He used to shun out in the sun. He used to shun out on the sand with the other muggers and gharials over there. The big crocodile fed mostly on fish, but also on deer and monkeys that came to drink, perhaps a duck or two. But sometimes here at the fort, he would on a pie dog full of parasites on a skeleton cow also. That means even if there is a cow who is like a skeleton, very lean and thin, the crocodile used to take that also away. And sometimes he went down to the burning ghats and found the half-burnt bodies of Indians cast into the stream. If half-burnt bodies were found, even the crocodiles took away those. Beside him in the shoals, as he lay waiting, glimmered a blue gem. So beside where this crocodile was there was a blue bead or a blue gem was lying over there. It was not actually a gem, though it shone like a gem. By chance, it was perforated right there, the neck of the bottle perhaps, a blue bead. In this shrill, noisy village above the fort, out of the mud house, the same color as the ground, came a little girl, a thin, starving child dressed in the earthen-colored rag. She had torn the rag into to make a skirt and a sari. So there was a small girl who was utterly starving, not even have a proper dress to wear. Sepia was eating the last of her meal, chapati, wrapped around a smear of green chili and rancid butter, but she divided this also to make it more and bit it, showing straight white teeth. She make it or divided the food so that she can feel that she had more of the food. With her ebony hair and great eyes and her skin of oiled brown cream, she was happy, immature child woman, about 12 years old. Barefoot, of course, and often goosey cold on a winter morning and born to toil. She was starving and she used to, toil very hard for her living, but she was a very happy going child. In all her life, she had never owned anything but a rag. She had never owned even one anna, not a pice, not a pie, even to buy, say, a handful of blown glass beads from that stall in the bazaar where they were piled like stars, or one of the thin glass bangles that the man kept on the stick, and you could choose which color you have. She knew what finery was, though she had been with her parents and brothers all through the jungle to the little town at the railhead where they were this bazaar, and she had walked through all the miling people and the dogs and monkeys full of fleas, the idle gossiping bargaining humanity spitting Betelgeuse, heard the bell of the sacred bull clonking as he lumped along through the dust and hubba. So, she has gone through the market with her parents and brothers. She has seen all this comforts of life all around her, but she has never herself gone through this comforts of life. She had paused amazed before the sweetmeats stall to gaze at the brilliant honey confectionaries abuzz with dust and flies. They smelled wonderful, above the smell of drains and humanity and cheap cigarettes. At home, she sometimes tasted wild honey or crunched the syrup out of the stalk of sugar cane, but these sweets were green and magenta. So, although she has stood in before the stall selling sweets, but she could never afford to buy them. Yes, sometimes she has tasted the wild honey at home, but that could not be compared with the sweets at the stall. Then there was a cloth stall stacked with great rolls of new cotton cloth stamped on the edge with the master sign on a tiger's head and smelling so wonderful of its dressing straight from the mills that Sibia could have stood by it all day. But there were other wonders to see: satin sewn with real silver thread, teen trees from Birmingham, and a sari which had gold chips of looking glass embroidered into the border. She joined the crowd around a Kashmiri travelling merchant on his way to bungalows. He was showing dawn colored silks that poured like cream, and he had got a little locked chest with turquoises and opals in it. Best of all, a box which, when you pressed it, a bell tinkled and a yellow woolen chick jumped out. So she has seen many wonders in the world around her in the market, where different type of silk were sold, real silver threads were sold, and the Kashmiri traveling and around the bungalows and selling the dawn colored silks and also selling turquoises and opals. These are the different gems actually. And there was the most important thing that she has seen was a box when if you press a bell, a yellow woolen chicken would jump out. So to her this was a wonder. There was no end to the wonders of the world. But Sibia, in all her life from birth to death, was marked for work. Since she could toddle, she had husked corn and gathered stick and put dung to dry and cooked and weeded and carried and fetched water and cut grass for fodder. Right from her childhood, I think, when she had started to walk, thereafter she had started to work. She was going with her mother from some other woman now to get paper grass from the cliffs above the river. When you had enough of it, you can take it down by bullock cart to the railhead and sell it to the agent who would arrange for its dispatch to the paper mills. The women often toiled all day at this work, and the agent sat on silk cushions smoking a hookah. Soon, once the women used to collect a certain amount, then they could go it to the agent, and the agent would send it to the paper mill, and in exchange the women used to get some money. Such thought did not trouble Sibia. However, as she skipped along with the sickle and homemade hay fork beside her mother, you could skip on the way out but not on the way back when you ached your tiredness, and that was great load to carry. So she along with her mother and other women used to go and cut the grass. When you are going at that time, Sibia could skip the work and play a little. Her mother would not mind. But while coming back, she has to accompany her mother as they had to carry a heavy load way back home. Some of the women were wearing necklaces made out of lullabies, these shiny scarlet seeds, black one end, that grew everywhere in the jungle. It was best to have new necklaces each year instead of last year's faded one, and Sibia was making one too. How nice it was going to be to have one rattling Swiss round her neck as she frosted along with lots of necklaces. Even she thought that she will have one such necklace. But each seed, hard as stone, has to be drilled with a red hot needle, and the family needle was snapped, so she must wait till they could buy another one. So even she could not make this beads necklace. Oh, for strings and strings of glass and beads, anklets, earrings, nose rings, bangles, all the gorgeous dazzles of the bazaar, all her little golden body decorated. She badly, wanted all these jewelries. Chattering as they went, the women followed the dusty track towards the river. On their way, they passed a Gujjar encampment of grass herd where these nomadic graziers would live for a time until the animals had perhaps finished all the easy grazing within reach, as they were not able to sell enough of their white butter and white milk in the district, or there were no one to buy the young male buffaloes or for tiger bait, and finally the Gujjars used to move from one place to another. At present, this Gujjar had a camp near this river. Or perhaps a cattle-killing tiger was making a nuisance of himself, then they did move on. So there can be different reason why they moved out of the place. Sibia glanced at the Gujjar women as she went past. They wore trousers, tight and wrinkled at the anklets, as their ears large silver rings made out of the melted rupees, and one of them was clinking a stick against the big brass gurras in which they fetched water from the river for the camp to see which one was empty. The men and boys were out on the camp just now with the herd or gone to the bazaar to sell the produce. But one or two buffaloes were standing, almost creatures of great weight noses and moving jaws and crowed black bones. The Gujars were actually junglis, as Sibia was too, born and bred in the forest. For countless centuries, these forebears had lived like this, getting their lives from animals, from grass and trees as they scratched their food together and stored their substances in large herd and silver jewelry. They were man in the wandering pastoral age, not stone age, hunters and not yet cultivators. So they were the nomadic race, yet moving from one place to another. Ah, now there was river twinkling between the trees, sunlit beyond the dark trunks. They could hear it rushing along. The women came out of the shore and made for the stepping stones. They had plenty to laugh and bicker about as they approached the river in a noisy crowd. They girded upon their skirts so as to jump from stone to stone as they clanked their sickles and forks together over their shoulder to have easy of movement. They shouted their quarrels above the gush of the river. So the women, they abreast the river. They had somehow girded up the skirt so that it is easier for them to jump from stone to stone and cross the river. Noise usually frightened crocodiles, so they keep on shouting and at the peak of their voice so that the crocodile does not come nearby. But the big mugger did not move, and all the women crossed in safety to the other bank. Here they had to climb a still hillside to get it at the grass, but all felt to with a will and sliced away at it wherever they had foothold to be had. Down below them ran the broad river, pouring powerfully out from its deep, narrow pools among the cold cliffs and shadows spreading into warm shallows, lit by kingfishers. Great turtles lived there, and mahashir weighing more than 100 pounds. Crocodiles too. Sometimes you could see them lying out on the slabs of clay over there, but there were none to be seen at that particular moment. Where Sibia was working, wind coming across hundreds of miles of trees cooled her sweating body, and she could look down over the river as if she was a bird. Although she did not dare stop for a moment under her mother's eye, her imagination took her in swinging flight over the bright water and golden gear to the bank where she had played as a child. In these caverns above the high water mark of the highest flood, she had stored some little bowls molded of clay while they hardened. So she had made small, toys with clay. By now they had hardened. If there anything could be used for coloring, they would have been fine, painted with marigolds and elephant. Even she thought if she could have anything to paint this clay toys, she could have painted them with marigolds and elephants. Child, the sharp word came. The glare of her mother's angry, sweating face pulled Sibia back to work, and they toiled on. But at last it was time to go back to see to the animals and the evening meal. The loaded women set out to cross the river again. Sibia hung back. She had just dwelt a bit and run and see if the little clay cups were still there in the cave waiting to be painted and used. Although the women were now tired and loaded, they still talked. Those in front yelled to those behind. They crossed the river safely and disappeared up the track into the trees on the other side. Even their voices died away and silence fell. Sibia came down alone to the stepping stones. The light of the evening was striking up the gorge pink into the ultraviolet shadows. Now that the sun was off it, the water poured almost invisible among the stones with no reflection to show where it began. Sibia stepped into the first stone. She was heavily weighted with her muscles stretched out, aching. The hay folk swicked into the packed dry grass and dug into her collarbone so close under the skin in spite of the sari bunched up to make a pad. While she was halfway over, she put her load down on a big boulder to rest. She was halfway down the river when she took a rest and leaned and breathed on the foe. She was so tired. At the same moment, a Gujjar woman came down with two gurras to the water on the other side. In order to get the good clear water, she would quickly fill both gurras to the top without sand. She walked into the stepping stone. She was within a yard of the crocodile when he lunged at her. Up out at the dangling water heaved the great replied water slashing of him, his livid jaws yawning and all his teeth flushing as he slashed at her leg. The women screamed, dropped both brass pots with a clatter on the boulder, from whence they bounced into the water, and Sibia saw them bob away in the current. Oh, the two good vessels gone! The Gujar woman recoiled from the crocodile, but her jaws closed on her leg, and the same moment as she slipped and fell on the bone-breaking stone and clutched one of the timber log to save herself. On the other hand, the crocodile was keeping on pulling the woman, and while the woman was trying to save herself by clutching a mere timber log. The log was not enough to save the Gujar woman, but she has to do nothing. Anyway, the log jammed between the two boulders, which gave some time, and the woman kept clinging to it and screaming while the crocodile pulled on her leg, threshing his mighty tail, bang, bang, to and fro in a great smacking flex as he tried to drag her free and carry her off. But fortunately, as the log was jammed between the two boulders, so the woman could get a little hold. But blood spread everywhere. Sibia sprang. From boulder to boulder, she came leaping into a rock gorge. Sometimes it had seemed difficult to cross the stone, especially the big gap in the middle where the river coursed through the bulge of glass. But now she came on wings, choosing her footing in mid-air without even thinking about it, and in one moment she was beside the shrieking women. In the boiling bloody water, the face of the crocodile fastened round her leg was tugging to and fro, smiling, as if that, yes, I am winning. Her eyes rolled on to Sibia. One slap of the tail could kill her, as if the crocodile thought, this little girl, I will give her one slap with my tail. That would be enough for this little girl. He struck up, shot the water 20 feet and fell like a silver chain. Again, the rock jumped under the blow. But in the daily heroism of the jungle, as common as the trees, Sibia did not hesitate. She aimed at the reptile's eyes. With all the force of her little body, she drove the hayfork in the eyes, and one prong went in right in, while its spear scratched past at the horny cheek. The crocodile reared up in convulsion till half his lizard body was out of the river, the tail and nose nearly meeting over his stony back. Then he crashed back, exploding the water in an uproar of bloody foam. He disappeared out of pain. He would die, not yet, but presently, though his death would not be known for days, not till his stomach blown with gas bloated him. Then perhaps he would be found upside down among the logs at the timber boom with pus in his eyes. So finally, this blow in the eye of the crocodile would surely kill him. Yes, not today, but a slow, painful death. Sepia got her arms round the fainting woman and somehow dragged her from the water. She stopped her wounds with sand and bound them with rag and helped her home to the Gujjar encampment, where the man made a litter to carry her to someone for treatment. Then Sibia went back for her grass and sickle and fork. The fork was lying in the river, not carried away, luckily. As she bent to pick it up out of the water, she saw the blue bead. Not blue now, but with the sun nearly gone, but a no-color white bead and its shape wobbling in the movement of the stream. She reached her arm down into a yard of the cold silk water to get it, missing it first of all because of refraction. Then there it lay in her weight palm, perfect, even pierced, ready for use, with the sunset shuffled about inside it like gold dust. All her heart went up in flames of joy. After bed, she twisted it into the top of her skirt against her tummy, so she would know if it burst through the poor cloth and fell. Then she picked up her fork, sickle, and the heavy grass and set off home. Aye, what a day! Her bare feet smudged into the wrinkle mark of the snakes in the dust. There was a thin singing of malaria mosquitoes among the trees now, and this track was much used at night by the morose old Makna elephants also, the tuskless. So this jungle was full of dangers, the malaria mosquitoes, the snakes and the Makna elephant, but still she was not at all afraid. The stars came out, she also noticed that. On the way back, she met her mother out of breath, who was coming to look for her and also scolding her. I did not see till I was home that you were not there. I thought something must have happened to you. And Sibia, bursting with her story, cried, Something did. I found a blue bead for my necklace. Look. She was so excited to get the blue bead. She did not even say the story how she had saved the women. For her, getting the blue bead was more important. Thank you.